Welcome to this explainer. Next time you're pushing a cart through the grocery store, I want you to take a real close look at your receipt. What if I told you that those prices, they're actually being dictated by military standoffs literally thousands of miles away? Today, we're synthesizing two critical 2026 reports to show you exactly how traditional military flashpoints and the quiet, almost invisible weaponization of global agriculture are crashing together to totally reshape our world. We're looking at a huge shift here, where the front lines aren't just drawn on a map anymore, they're sitting right there on your dinner plate.
Here is our roadmap for today. We're going to cover the 2026 global flashpoints, the widening crisis belt, the new battlefield of agriculture, weaponizing the food supply, and finally, the cost at home. Let's jump right in.
Section 1. The 2026 Global Flashpoints. Right now, major global powers are basically treating international rules as, well, mere suggestions rather than actual laws. We are seeing some completely unprecedented stuff. For example, U.S. military operations in Venezuela actually resulting in the capture of Nicolás Maduro. Meanwhile, over in Asia, China's Justice Mission 2025 simulation drills are literally encircling Taiwan in a mock blockade. And then, of course, over in Europe, Russia is grinding out its absolute largest territorial gains in Ukraine since the very first year of that war.
Now, the sheer volume of these simultaneous crises happening all at once, it's completely shattering the global taboo against using military force. As the Nordic Defense Review points out, we've crossed into an era where catastrophic risk isn't just a forecast anymore, it is a deliberate, calculated policy choice. The new template is firmly set. Major powers are deciding to just act first and deal with the consequences later.
Which brings us to Section 2, the widening crisis belt.
Because, you see, the volatility extends way beyond just those main superpower standoffs. We're watching the formation of a permanent transnational crisis belt. The Middle East remains incredibly unstable. We're talking fragile Gaza ceasefires, Houthi strikes in the Red Sea, and mounting unrest in Iran. Down in Africa, there's a brutal civil war and deepening famine in Sudan, unfolding right alongside a spreading insurgency in the Sahel region. And get this, we have to consider the hybrid threats in Latin America. Drug cartels aren't just sticking to traditional smuggling routes anymore. They are actively deploying surveillance drones, cyber intrusions, and AI deepfakes to evade authorities. I mean, it sounds exactly like a sci-fi movie, but it's literally happening right now.
So with all this high-tech, kinetic warfare exploding globally, we really have to pause for a second and ask ourselves a pretty critical question. What if the single most potent weapon in this new multipolar world doesn't actually fire bullets at all?
Section 3. The new battlefield. Agriculture.
For decades, the global power narrative was super straightforward. Leverage was all about technological innovation in places like Silicon Valley and, oil in the Middle East. Farming was just farming. It was a background thing. But today, that reality has completely flipped on its head. Food sovereignty is essentially the new tech monopoly. Agriculture has been elevated into a direct, powerful tool of foreign policy, and honestly, an absolutely vital pillar for domestic stability and political survival.
Moving on to Section 4, weaponizing the food supply.
We can clearly track how China took something as simple as the humble soybean and turned it into a devastating geopolitical weapon. Look back at 2018, when the US imposed trade restrictions, Beijing didn't just hit back with tech. No, they targeted the American farmer by redirecting their massive bulk soybean purchases away from the US. Fast forward to 2025, renewed tariff showdowns led Beijing to just completely suspend those US soybean buys again. And by 2026, pulling that plug caused such plunging prices and massive farm bankruptcies that it actually forced a very tense, high-stakes market stabilization meeting over in Busan.
But hey, the US and China are definitely not alone in this. The European Union is facing massive internal friction right now. Farmers are literally blocking major highways from Paris to Warsaw with their tractors. And why? Because they feel like they're being actively sacrificed in these really complex bilateral trade deals. European farmers are getting squeezed by a new US-EU tariff agreement that limits their competitiveness, plus an influx of Ukrainian agricultural products. But the absolute most controversial flashpoint? That would be the reactivation of the Mercosur agreement. Critics bluntly call this a cows for cars trade-off, where European agriculture is essentially being sold out just to secure access for industrial exports.
An opinion paper from the IEEE highlights exactly why this is such a huge deal on a global scale. Get this, the Mercosur region alone can supply up to 60% of the protein consumed worldwide. 60%! That is an unbelievable amount of geopolitical leverage. So, superpowers are now aggressively scrambling to lock down these long-term protein pipelines. Agriculture has fundamentally become a make-or-break security factor. If governments mishandle it, they're looking at large-scale social unrest and, frankly, getting toppled. Which brings us to our final section, Section 5, the cost at home.
1/3. That is how much more it costs to simply put a meal on your table today compared to before the pandemic. These global power struggles we've been talking about, they aren't just abstract theories being tossed around in windowless war rooms. They are literally priced right into the bread and the eggs sitting in your shopping cart.
There's really a perfect storm driving this inflation. First up, kinetic conflicts. The war in Ukraine alone triggered massive global shocks to hydrocarbon and fertilizer costs. Second, structural climate shifts. We're seeing extreme weather events systematically wiping out harvests and causing absolute logistical nightmares worldwide. And third, new decarbonization regulations are slapping heavy compliance costs right onto the supply chain. So you've got war, extreme weather, and red tape, all of them converging directly on your dinner plate.
To wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a thought to really chew on. We turn on the news and we see major powers redrawing maps with blockades and drone strikes. But as the world continues to fracture, the absolute most crucial battleground moving forward, it might just be the one that feeds us. So as conflicts multiply, how much of our global security is secretly tethered to your daily bread? Pay attention to where your food comes from, folks. It explains the way the world works much better than you might think.